Hey everyone, you're about to hear a brand new 15-minute audio drama based on an amazing screenplay titled The Unfinished Gift. We at Kappa Studios believe this script can not only become a tremendous film, but also a Christmas classic that weaves the love and forgiveness of Christ at the core of its message. If you would like to help this film become a reality, give us a call at 818-843-3400 or email us at info@kappastudios.com. And now, please enjoy some select scenes from The Unfinished Gift.
It's 1943. And the whole world is being torn apart by war. On the home front, 7-year-old Patrick Collins' life has also been torn apart. His mother just died in a car accident, and his father is off fighting Nazis as a bomber pilot in Europe. A caring social worker named Catherine Townsend brings Patrick to the doorstep of a grandfather he's never met.
Come on, Patrick.
Miss Townsend called.
Come meet your grandfather.
Ian Collins, Patrick's grandfather, is miserable about the arrangement. His wife passed away several years ago. The last thing he needs is minding a little boy, and he wonders what lies Patrick's mother and his son Sean have told the boy about him. The reasons behind their feud still simmer beneath the surface of Collins' heart.
Mr. Collins,
What?
would you like to meet your grandson, Patrick?
Her words hung in the air with the frosty mist. Collins stood there staring at the boy. Collins looked at the woman, then back at the boy, and realized how ill-prepared he was for this moment.
Still, he can't stir up an ounce of affection for his grandson, or even call him by name.
Mr. Collins, I thought my office had called you about our coming here tonight.
They did?
Well, you don't seem very prepared. You know what he's been through. You couldn't even give him a hug?
We only just met.
He's your grandson.
She promises Patrick she'll do everything in her power to bring his father home soon. The elder Collins wishes her success. The sooner, the better. Thus begins an uneasy tension between Patrick and his grandfather. The tension builds one morning after Patrick finds a hand-carved wooden soldier in the attic.
What is that you've got there? This? I found it up there, over by the... Who said you could touch that? Well, no one. Give me that! His grandfather lunged toward him. Patrick fell back on the stairs. His grandfather snatched the wooden soldier from Patrick and stormed past him back up the stairs. I'm sorry, sir. I wasn't taking it. I was just coming down to ask your permission. Don't ever touch this again! You hear me? He was already in the attic, his voice trailing off. Patrick wanted to run down the stairs and straight out the front door and never look back. Can't leave you alone for 1 hour, he heard his grandfather say. No respect at all. Guess I know where you got that from.
He had no way of knowing that, in the years before he was born, Collins had begun to carve this soldier for Patrick's father. Just at the moment their relationship began to unravel, he never finished it. And for Collins, it's become a symbol of the rift between them. The only bright spot for Patrick in this whole ordeal is time spent with Mrs. Fortini, a wonderful Italian widow who lives next door.
Is that him? She said, handing Collins her coat and staring right at Patrick.
What a beautiful boy! You must be so proud.
In a moment, he was engulfed in her arms. He couldn't help but smile. He instantly decided he liked her a great deal.
When a telegram arrives saying Patrick's father has been shot down before they could reach him, he's listed as missing in action.
There's no reason to assume Sean is dead. Missing means missing. It doesn't mean... Tears began to pour down his face. He tried holding them back and wiping them away, but there was no stopping them. He looked up at the door, then the windows, as if someone might see. He finally gave up. buried his face in his hands and let the tears flow. His whole body erupted into heaving sobs. "Sean," he cried, "my boy, my poor boy."
Fearing now that Sean may be dead, Collins is torn by guilt. His wife's dying wish was that they would reconcile, and Collins wonders how he can possibly raise a little boy he hardly knows on his own. That night, he gets drunk and leaves the telegram out where Patrick accidentally reads it. Patrick is heartbroken and horrified at the thought of having to live permanently with this mean old man. He runs out into the night, hoping to find Miss Townsend, unaware that the snow which has begun to fall will soon turn into a blizzard. Believing Patrick to be asleep upstairs and still half drunk, Collins rummages through a box of personal effects belonging to Patrick's mother. Collins discovers a shoebox full of letters sent from Sean to his wife. Now desperate to know anything about his son, he stays up half the night reading the letters. A picture emerges of what their life together was like. It's clear they were very much in love. But toward the end of the letters, another story emerges. It becomes clear that Elizabeth was trying to push Sean toward reconciling with his father, not to keep them apart. Collins is shocked as he reads the last letter in the stack, from Elizabeth to Sean. Written on the day she died, it had never been sent. She tells of her plans to visit Collins that day with Patrick, hoping that through Patrick, the wall between them might finally begin to come down.
Elizabeth was planning to visit him and to bring Patrick. His heart sank as he thought on it. He knew how he'd have responded. His hatred and prejudice would have been right there at the surface, and he'd likely not have kept a civil tongue, maybe even run them both off with a broom or a stick. And Ida would have been watching from heaven, and so would God. And Collins might have put his mortal soul in peril by the whole exchange. Tears started to fall again from his face, directly onto the table, his head bowed so low. What a waste of a man he had become. What a total waste of a man. Now Patrick had no one, he thought. No one but him. And look how he'd been treating his only grandson, not just recently, but for his entire life. And how he had treated the boy's father, his own son, Sean, for no reason except his stubborn pride. He was the source behind all the heartache and confusion for everyone, so he could live all alone in this cold, dreary house, squandering his remaining years in isolation and solitude. Then Elizabeth dies, his only grandson is brought to him, and all he thinks about is, when is he going to leave? What kind of punishment would a man like this face before God? There could be no easy penance for him. Collins would be headed straight for hell. God, forgive me, he cried, but I do deserve hell and more. What can I do to make this right? Can I even make it right?
When Collins heads off to bed, he discovers Patrick is missing. Frantically, he searches the house, but Patrick's not there. He's not next door with Miss Fortini either. He is lost, somewhere out in the snowstorm.
He didn't see any lights from the many businesses that lined the street. Even the Christmas lights were off. Only the street lights were lit, and they seemed to blink on and off in the swirling snowfall. Patrick looked both ways. A lone city bus pulled away from the curb, leaving an empty bench behind. He began his trek across the street, dragging his suitcase as before. As he reached the curb, he realized the lights didn't just seem like they were off across the street. They were off. Every business was closed. He sighed and tried to fight back the tears. What would he do now?
The grief of having lost his son, and now possibly Patrick, melts the ice around Collins's heart. Patrick is found half frozen in a dark alley by Ezra Jeffries, a poor black man.
Good Lord, he said. What a child doing out here at a time like this? He had to get him out of this place, but quick. Ezra moved more by instinct now than sense. He couldn't feel his fingers or toes, but he could still feel the boy under his coat, and his legs were still pushing through the snow. The street lights were out on his block, but he found his way by the odd light shining here and there through the tenement windows. He stomped down a few times, trying to get some feeling back. Ruby must have heard him. She flung that front door open quick as you please. The wind caught it and it slammed against the back wall.
Ezra, that you please be you?
She cried. It's me, darling. I'm all right. Colder than I ever been in my life, but I'm all right. She started climbing down to meet him. Now you get back in the living room, darling. You ain't dressed for this. I'll be up directly.
Your daddy's home, boys. God brung him back just like we prayed. Boys, go get the blankets off the bed, put them on your daddy and this little boy.
Ruby walked toward the kitchen.
I already got hot water on the stove. Have you some nice hot tea in just a minute. I'm so glad you're home.
Ezra knew he'd have to tell her everything. She'd like the hero part, about him finding and saving this here boy. But then he'd have to tell her where he found the boy, and dread filled his heart as he thought about the hardest part of the tale, the part where he lost his job. What an awful night this was for his poor Ruby. And that only 2 days out from Christmas.
On Christmas Eve, the weather finally breaks, and Ezra brings Patrick safely home to his grandfather. Patrick is welcomed by Collins with open arms. While Patrick was gone, Collins had finished carving the wooden soldier and gives it to Patrick for a Christmas present.
Grandpa, you finished him,
he shouted. I did, said Collins. Merry Christmas.
For me? He's for me?
Collins couldn't speak. He could only nod. He held out his arms. Patrick ran right past the wooden soldier and jumped straight into them.
Thank you, Grandpa. Thank you, thank you.
They hugged a few moments more. Patrick, he said, can you please forgive a mean old fool? I've treated you so badly, and you didn't deserve it, not any of it. I am so sorry, so very sorry. Patrick hugged him tightly and held him a moment as he cried, That's all right, Grandpa. I forgive you. Catherine and Mrs. Fortini had been watching from the doorway.
Mr. Collins,
Catherine said, wiping her own tears away.
There's someone I would like you to meet. This is Mr. Ezra Jeffries, the man who found Patrick the other night in the middle of the storm.
Collins walked right up to Ezra Jeffries and held out his hand. Sir, he said, I owe you a debt I could never properly repay. But I offered a $5,000 reward to whoever found Patrick and brought him safely home. I believe, Mr. Jeffries, that money is rightfully yours. Ezra looked as if he might faint dead away at the news. He was speechless.
To everyone's surprise, as they all celebrate Christmas dinner the next day, they hear a knock on the door.
I'll get it,
said Patrick. He jumped up and ran to the door before anyone said a word. He opened the door and screamed, Daddy! Mrs. Fortini gasped. Collins' eyes opened wide and he dropped his fork. Catherine looked up. It was almost beyond taking in. How could this be? But she recognized Captain Sean Collins instantly from his picture. I knew God would find you, Patrick said as he buried his face in his father's overcoat. I'm sorry if I surprised you, said Sean as he picked Patrick up in his arms. I sent 2 telegrams, but I guess they didn't get through with the storm. Sean looked down at the wooden soldier on the coffee table. He shook his head slowly back and forth, then looked up at his father, tears welling up in his eyes. For a few moments, no one spoke. Dad, he's beautiful.
Grandpa made him for me,
Patrick announced. Did he? Ian Collins got up from his chair and all but ran toward his son. Sean, he said, erupting in tears. Sean gently put Patrick down and they embraced, the elder Collins' shoulder now heaving with sobs. I'm so sorry, Sean. So very sorry. for Elizabeth, for all I've done. All of it. I'm so glad you're alive. Patrick came beside them both, hugging one leg each.
I prayed harder than I ever prayed, and I told God I didn't care if I got anything else for Christmas except you. And look what he did. He gave me you, and the only other thing I wanted. The wooden soldier Grandpa made.
I love you, Dad.
Thanks for listening to Select Scenes from The Unfinished Gift. If you have any questions or would like to help this script become a feature film, call us at 818-843-3400 or email info@kappastudios.com. For info on turning your script into an audio drama, contact us as well. Thanks again for listening.